back with another episode of the Branders Magazine Talking with Branders podcast. I'm Stephen Bacanza. I am stoked to be sitting live in a studio with an actual person, Gary Kopervas. Welcome to the podcast. How are you, my friend?
Yes, 100% human in the room podcast. How exciting. Happy to be here. Stephen, thanks for having me.
Oh, of course. I can feel the energy already, and I know this is going to be an incredible conversation. But Gary, for those of the audience who don't know you, 60-second elevator pitch on who you are, where you come from, what you do.
For sure. I am Gary Kopervas, and I am a founder and creative strategist at Kopious Labs, which is a brand consultancy and training company. I work with, as I describe it, ambitious companies building unordinary brands, and that's it's a key idea, and it's one that recently has come about, is the idea of what it means to be unordinary with brands. And I come in from a brand consultancy, and I think the interesting and odd thing perhaps is my background is in brand consultancy and syndicated cartoonist. So I've been a syndicated cartoonist since I was 7 years old.
Oh, wow.
And a brand strategist, and came up through the agency side as a writer, creative director. And the two, as time went on, became more dependent on each other. And thinking like a cartoonist and a brand strategist, if you could imagine, has become my space.
What's your favorite cartoon?
Favorite cartoon? Well, it's funny you ask, because with my friends and family and fellow cartoonists, they break out along two lines. You're either a sort of a Peanuts Charles Schulz guy or Far Side Gary Larson. I come squarely down on Gary Larson.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Far Side.
Well, Far Side of the Moon to you, right?
Yes, yeah. He's a brilliant guy.
So Gary and I met a couple weeks ago at a local diner here in New Jersey and had an incredible conversation about your experience at the HOW conference.
Yes.
You were attending in Nashville, and this is your second year speaking.
Correct.
Tell us more.
Yeah. Well, the HOW conference, for people who might not be familiar with it, is really an annual show around the HOW community, which is creative. It's largely designers and writers and to some extent entrepreneurs. A lot of small design companies, creative agencies, but also very large companies, I've found. And each year they gather and have tremendous 3-day conference with speakers from super large companies. This year they had Coke and Pentagram came in, which is a design company that we all know about. And it's 3 days of workshops and presentations, lots of mingling and lots of social and usually cool places. Last year, my first year was in Boston. So I presented a program there about doodling. I do a program called Doodle or Die, which is how to use visual thinking, and it's where a lot of my cartoonist side comes out. This year was different, but it was in Nashville, Tennessee, Music City, which was pretty phenomenal. If you've been down there.
I've actually never been to Nashville. Man.
Well, it's a funny thing. It's Music City, and it's got Broadway full of honky tonks and bars and Garth Brooks and what have you. But it's a super creative town, between the number of songwriters and big time performers. Everyone's moving down there. Yeah. It's a huge creative community. So points to HOW design for, using it as a destination, because it gave plenty of stimulus, if you know what I mean. So Boston was last year, and this year was in Nashville. But this year was interesting, and I think we touched on it when we spoke at the diner last week, is that, this is the season for conferences, people getting away. Important thing is, though, 2 years ago, they weren't happening, and in fact, I was scheduled to do the HOW conference a year ago prior to Boston, so that'd be 3 years ago, and 2 months or a month and a half before they canceled it, people were not comfortable. So my first big appearance at HOW was delayed because of COVID, and just personally and my own colleagues, we started. I know I did. I started to feel a little bit of that isolation of like, wow, I really do miss it. And Zoom, as efficient as it is, I felt there was a really a bubbling up yearning of like community, and that connection, And last year in Boston, a really good turnout, I'm told, and I was happy to present the first time at Hal last year. Had a great time, tons of great times and connections to people. This year doubled. And I think as I was mentioning, last year was like maybe 50, 60 people in the room that I was presenting to, which was fun and very interactive. And without really telling me what they were expecting, I showed up to do my session this year, and it was about 135 people. Every workshop. I'm glad that number of people came to see my workshop, but every workshop had 100 plus people in it. So the organizers at HOW, which are a great group of people, were very excited, and it's trending because I'm told HOW had, an extraordinarily large number of attendees every year, and it's arcing towards that again.
Yeah.
So, and I think in general, and we know that Cannes was a week ago, and that was, I did not make the trip out to France. I don't know, Stephen, if you
I wish I could say I just got back, but
I don't know if you had your passport punched, but I did not.
Maybe next year.
Maybe next year. But it seems like, again, that was in full swing.
My LinkedIn hasn't stopped with just the nauseating feeds of people beachside on the Mediterranean.
I am going to the Jersey Shore this weekend, so I don't know if it's equal to that. But I think it does demonstrate something really important too, is that people in the industry, whether it's creative, non-creative, agencies, or what have you, is the yearning for that human connection. It's back.
Yeah.
And how it translates into the future of work and what companies decide to do with hybrid workforces, who knows. But in Nashville, I just saw it again. People couldn't have been happier to connect and just be amongst their own in a community. And I think I have friends in retail, e-commerce and things, and there was a retail show in Chicago, and they said a lot of the things I just said. It was like, it's incredible, people all over the place, and the energy. I think whatever the reason for gathering, people are gathering.
Yeah.
And I think it's a phenomenal trend.
They a couple weeks ago was a show that I've attended in the past called Infocom, all about digital experiences. So part retail, part marketing, part branding, part technology. Again, my LinkedIn feed was just the incredible times and how good it is that people are not only back to being able to attend these conferences, but there's almost like a rejuvenation that has happened, right? Like COVID taketh, COVID giveth, I guess, right? It took away so much, but it's also, I think, given people once again the opportunity to evaluate what's important. And energy is important. Human connection is important. Not working in a silo is important, and just being amongst comrades, right? Like that's important. What was it like walking around the streets of Nashville? Like, did the HOW conference, did it permeate through the streets? Like, were you running into people, and was there camaraderie there?
Yeah, and it's hard to override the energy that lives on Broadway in Nashville. I mean, just the amazing amount of players and guitar players, and the incredible amount of creative
juice and energy
in the streets. I think it certainly fed the HOW community, and the great part is that people. And they were so good, the workshops, and there was plenty to fill your days with. I think the great part is, and it's smart in picking a location to have that, is people probably meeting for the first time said, "Hey, let's take an Uber into the city, into downtown," because it wasn't in the hot spot of Nashville. It was just off at the Gaylord Opryland, which is like a Disneyland for Nashville, but it gave people a little bit of an option to go and do something that wasn't in the industry, because it's like sipping off a fire hose. You do 8 hours of that. It's just, let's just let your mind wander. So a place that could give attendees so much to do. There were tons of Ubers running out of the Opryland resort going into town, and I think there's plenty of great stories to tell.
I can imagine.
I had a couple that were, upstanding, but a couple people that we went in town and went to a barbecue and had, just sharing stories casually about, it was a woman who worked at Kimberly-Clark, and her challenges from an industrial design standpoint. So that human connection is a couple things. And one is, what's your challenges like? What's your day-to-day like? And there's a great amount of empathy. But the one thing when I looked out across the workshops, and I got to meet a lot of the speakers at speakers gathering, the speaker dinners and things, and it's really about a couple things, and it's about transformation and transition. It's that change, and it's going to be an obvious one, is that change is forcing companies to transform the way they did what they did. And when I spoke to some of the people that I know at very large companies, they too are trying to figure out, okay, we need to adapt, we need to pivot, we need to do some things. And they shared that at workshops, which is great. And Coke and Jello talked about a rebrand, and Jello, and it's cool to hear that even really large companies.
You think Jello would have had this rebrand talk?
How many different directions could Jello go?
I mean, but you think they would have had this with the whole what was his name? Oh my gosh, the Huxtable. Oh my god, I can't remember his name.
Cosby.
Yeah, Bill Cosby.
Oh, this wasn't pudding. This was the Wiggle Wiggle Jello.
Oh,
so
Wiggle Wiggle.
No,
okay,
no
not
pudding. Then the people it's too soon.
Is it too soon?
Too soon on pudding.
Oh man.
But it was.
I'm always late.
And it was always great stories about in the year before it was about like yogurts and things. But the other side of that is that there's a lot of transitioning from smaller personal. There's a lot of workshops about career transitioning. And the other part about it is huge. Not just at How, I'm sure, is entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
I mean, even
the personal brand.
We're two of us sitting in the room right now at entrepreneurship, and how are others doing it, and how do people that do what we do, how do they build their thing?
Yeah.
And then I think that there was quite a bit of development. There's a whole lot of change will do that. It forces people to say, okay, I need to either skill up, get a new skill, learn some new things. So I think that need for human connection at a lot of these shows have to do with what do other people know that I need to maybe study up on or get good at.
Yeah.
And I think it's when you do that in a supportive environment, and that's the thing about How is everybody's in it together. It's super friendly and fun, and they provide a lot of social gatherings where people are completely at ease, and they come as they are.
I mean, they're playing the facilitator role, right? They're facilitating, sparking good conversation, and facilitating people getting together and networking, and in an environment that allows them to be their authentic self. Gary, what was your presentation this time?
Yeah. Well, this one, I stepped back and said, I think creativity right now is really.
Yeah, you can go off.
Sorry about that.
No, we're keeping it real around here.
Yes. So the workshop that I did was called Creating Eureka Moments. And Eureka, it was spelled a little differently, and it was YOUREKA, because creativity is and has always been very personal, and we know that growing up, we all have different experiences, we all have different DNA, we grew up in different places and have different influences, and creativity is just essentially the act of drawing from our subconscious, drawing it forward to solve problems. So I think moving forward, particularly with AI and Chat GPT right now, creativity is at a premium, and based on some of what I've gathered and what my own experiences with my own clients are right now, is people are in need of creative thinking, critical thinking, creative problem solving isn't just what people used to think of creative, which is creative department with just Nerf balls and ping pong tables.
Right.
We're responsible, and that's essentially the theme that I played through. Is we are responsible for our own our own version of our best creative selves, and that basically is when we grew up and we understood, and you listen to inspired creative people. It's always like inspiration just came out of nowhere, and it doesn't, And part of the presentation that I did was I asked the assembled group is how many people have ideas. How many people have ever had an idea? They all raise their hand. And what I mentioned next was, think about it. Did you have that idea because it just happened, or did it happen because you made it happen. And there's a lot of research, and some of my mentors showed me examples of high achieving people know how to stimulate creativity. They know how to create inspiration. It's a romantic idea to say a little muse or a little bird landed on the window and told me, a great idea. But we now live in times where creativity is on demand, and we need to produce it, particularly if that's your career, that's your job. You need to be able to summon it when you need it. So I brought in some research in my presentation that I was able to source from a place called System 1. And they say clearly that we are now in a creative crisis. Creativity crisis is the idea that around the year 2006 began the mechanization of creativity. And by that is digital transformation happened. And what we were used to doing creatively was now being supplanted by digital transformation. And my understanding is, and we all have seen it, is that when digital transformation comes in, you can see it in the form of speed, standardization, and efficiency. And those are three forces that could sort of blunt creativity. And
when you're forcing a creative to follow Six Sigma, rules, you're like, I can't.
Or standardization. When you start to say, okay, that's a great message, great ad, or a great piece of communication. Now we need to standardize it in 55 different formats and different ad units. It starts to lose some of that charm and juice. I mean, and it's interesting is that then the gentleman's name is Orlando Wood, who works for System 1. Says that over what is now 15 years of that standardization of creative thinking in the form of digital advertising is, and you'll see it. I mean, go look at your phone or your computer. Is the work we see now is flattened and devitalized. It lacks that life. It doesn't have that same life force that a lot of work in the past you'd seen, and it's an example of. When you look at iconic work like Absolute and the bottle campaign from years ago, and you look at what it's doing today, it's nothing very iconic about it. And I don't want to pull out Absolute for that. But my workshop was basically saying, and it was again largely a room of creatives. It was meant to inspire. And it was saying, look, you got into this business to be creative, and now it's time.
To be creative.
It's time again. All eyes are on you to bring it. And part of it is I did some exercises in the workshop, and it was about responsibility. Is that you are responsible for working on your own creative game and building your creative muscle. But because so much of what we're doing now is about collaboration, and with generative AI, it's about curating, and it's not a lone wolf approach. You're going to need to work with other people. So I try to inspire the group to talk about how to build their creative capabilities, but also what do you do to make others around you more creative. And when you help other people break down walls, everybody wins, because it back in the day, it was, creatives in suits. When I got into the ad business, it was...
Wow, you met Don Draper.
No, but I did work for two agencies that were run by the original Mad Men.
Wow.
Yeah, Ogilvy and Jerry Della Femina, and two vastly different personalities.
Jerry Della, I haven't heard that name in so long.
It got bought up and turned into a various number of other agencies, but he was one of those
he was an OG.
Mad guys.
Yeah,
he really was, among others. But it's essentially now is the time to step up and build up your creativity, because everyone and every brand depends on it. And I think I spend a good amount of my time coming out of workshops and meeting very large companies, being asked to come in internally and help large in-house creative companies become more fluent and comfortable in collaborating. And in the case of a very large pharma company, the brand guidelines were suffocating them. So
too much guidelines, too much. I don't know if I've read. I think I read this. Have you read Obsessed by Emily Harris?
Yes.
She was from Red Antler.
Yes.
Brilliant book.
Yeah.
She talks about we need to be consistent, but we need to be able to breathe. And if you are too consistent and too confined by brand guidelines or whatever, it's going to do what you just said. It's going to kill the creativity.
Yeah, and some in the past, others have talked about it as we're not creating a set of luggage, which is just various different sizes of the same unit.
Thing, right?
Yeah. So we're not shooting for that, and I think now every job, every position requires creativity.
Yeah,
and I think that's where I spend a good amount of my time now. Coaching teams on how to, and I'll give you the highlight from the workshop is I got a little dark and gloomy with the Orlando Woods work about the crisis in creativity, but got to a point where it's like, okay, well then, wise guy, what do you do?
Right, where's the opportunity?
What are you recommending? You're bringing me down here. It's not even noon.
Right.
You're bringing me down. And essentially, and we knew when, I'm going to ask you right now, when were you in your life the most creative, most freestyle, the most open to anything?
Many years ago. Many years ago.
I would contend,
when I first started.
Well, what I did is in the workshop, I talk about welcoming the entire group back to the kids table.
Yeah, when you were a kid.
When I was a kid, we all sat at the kids table.
Right.
And
the kids table is brilliant.
And so there's a point in the program where I turn the corner and try to say, okay, welcome everyone, welcome back to the kids table. And they were like, oh, cool. What do you I think I know what that means. I feel better now. You got me out of this crisis.
It means we get to eat first.
And I just asked, I asked the group, I said, okay, we all sat at a kids table at some point in our lives. And I just said, who wants to speak up? What do you remember about being at the kids table? And people were like, rebellious. Mm-hmm. You didn't have any filters. Mm-hmm. You said whatever you wanted.
It was a safe space.
It was, and yeah, it's a safe space. And I still remember someone said, what I remember is I always went home with cake in my hair, and I said, that's what that is, know, and full disclosure, a month before that, I was doing a creative workshop at a huge pharma company. And the morning of the first day, people were filtering into the room, and if you've been in sessions like that before, there's always stimulus on the table. Mm-hmm. Some little things of Play-Doh and little fidgets to keep your hands busy, because people, it's been shown you keep your hands busy, your mind follows, and it's loose, and good things happen. So I just sprinkled some stuff on tables, including crayons and some drawing paper, and it sent the right cues. But people started to fill the room. And we were just about ready to start, and 4 young designers came in, and there was only one table left. And they came in and kind of just smiled at the room and said, oh, man, sorry, we're late. We have to sit at the kids' table. And a 30-year veteran of this pharma company, who's now head of innovation, is sitting there working his Play-Doh and just looked over to the group of designers, 20-something designers, and said, don't worry about it. Every table is the kids' table. I had the name of the workshop that day. So while it is creating eureka moments, the invitation is, and what I described in the workshop is, you've got to come back to the kids' table. And then talked about quick 3 principles that allowed this creativity to flourish. And the first one was, it's okay to play. Mm-hmm. And most of us are too busy. We're again, in that digital market, we have a goal to hit. We need certain objectives. We're under gun. We have so much work to do, and under resourced. Mm-hmm. Who's got time to play? Mm-hmm. You have to, and those around you need to agree it's okay to play. And I showed a couple examples of some work that I'd been involved in where it's where that playtime generates very profitable ideas.
Yeah.
And names of brands and new products and campaign ideas. And the second one was go with it. When you're a kid, you don't filter, you don't judge. And some of this stuff is, we've probably heard this before, but now more than ever, you've got to go with something. And I know you have worked on some products where it was maybe started out as a wild idea, but you think it through, you work it, and it sees the light of day, and people respond. I've had similar ones as well, where it's like, and that's the essence of improv, which is yes and.
Yes and.
It's like yes and. I interpret it as just go with it.
I love that.
And the third one, this is one that I loved. I thought about it a little bit, and it was bring your own crayons. And Bring Your Own Crayons was inspired by The Office. I don't know if you've seen the TV show The Office.
Very much.
And Kevin Malone, big Kevin. They all went to a fundraiser for Robert, California. So it's a swanky hotel, linen tablecloth, fine china, tables, very expensive per plate meals. And at some point in the episode, it wasn't the main idea of the episode, but it was one of the little fringe things where they cut and they showed Kevin coloring on the table, like he was at a burger bar, and the waiter was aghast. He just ran over and said, "Sir, what are you doing? And where did you get those crayons?" And Kevin looked at him like, "No big deal. I brought them from home." So, great crew, love you guys. Don't forget to tip your waitresses. So the point of it is that you are responsible for bringing the crayons to the table. Yeah. Don't wait to be inspired by the people you're working with. Imagine now the next time we get into a meeting, a brainstorm, a strategy meeting, if my responsibility is not only to be creative, but how do I make you creative? How do I open up your idea? How do I keep people loose? So whether you figuratively or literally bring in crayons, do what you can to make the people around you more creative, because all boats rise, all ideas get better, and it's just a much better time. And right now, and there's a lot of signals that say people want to have fun, people want to laugh. Yeah, and the world's become too serious. The world's become too much doom scrolling, too much. It really has, and not to get too heavy on that, but it's you see the challenges now of mental health and isolation. It's just like, man, we need something fun and take our minds off it. And that's why I think many people after the talk came over and said, "Oh man, really enjoyed this. I love the kids table thing," and appreciate that, because we're very serious, and creativity right now needs to be coaxed out and not beaten with a hammer. Right. And I think the welcome back to the kids table really resonated. So that's great. There's some solid points that you made with those three. And the kids table, partly when I grew up, part of my kids table was the oven door opened up and chairs around the oven door. I love it. Because not only do we have a kids table, but when we were growing up, I had like the little kids table. So I was like on the little kids table where, you're kind of eating on the oven door. Improvisation. Improvisation is huge. And I've did improv for 10 years, a little bit over 10 years. And I have said this on record so many times that I attribute so much of how I communicate, how I talk to people, how I think creatively based on the fact that I understand the principles of improv, right? There's two principles. Number one, I guess three principles. Yes and, right? Don't kill your fellow actor, right? So if you were to tell me, Steven, the bookcase behind me is purple, I can't be like, no, Gary, it's blue. I should theoretically be, not only is it purple, but it's got this beautiful orange hue that almost makes it look blue. Now we're playing together. And the third rule, the most important rule of improv was there are no rules. Right? It's like throw the rule book out, and it's always stuck with me. It's so important. And you bring up something that I just wanted to bring about from How again, is principles and sharing methods. And that's the other thing that I can't speak for, Ken, I wasn't in France, and some of the other shows, but picking up on other people's methods and their principles, and what have you done that has made you successful? And to How's credit again, we were in Nashville. They brought a speaker in that was, it was hugely popular. They brought in a songwriter from Nashville, a longtime Nashville songwriter. He's written a lot of hits, Grammy type things. And one would go, what can a songwriter, a Nashville songwriter come in and tell a bunch of designers? And essentially he presented his methodology for writing a song. How do you get to it? It's built on a metaphor. What's the hook? Where's the verse? How does a chorus work? And in 70 minutes, he took the room from zero to a song. Interesting. And then he took it back to his studio and produced it, and they played it the next morning. Oh, how fun. It was fun. But to your point about, using the principles of improv for whatever work you're in, these are principles that are adaptable. And he started to say, and it's a great thing. He said, let's take the most boring title or objective. And it was like helping teammates work better together. And I was like, that's a yawner. So he said, let's start with a metaphor. And he talked about, it could be seeds, planting seeds in the garden. It could be, mates on a ship. It could be bees in a hive. And he said, let's do that. So he wound up taking us to a group of, 100 people maybe. And, he was a great facilitator. And at the end of the show, he was working live on a large screen. And we had written the song title. It had a verse and it had a chorus. And, it was very satisfying. But it was an example of what you're just describing is what new principles could you learn that you could adapt to what you're doing to keep what you're doing fresh, or teach yourself a new way to solve a problem that you hadn't done before. And I was really excited about that because I've been a fan of musicality in the creative process.
Yeah.
And if you read there's a book called Live from Cupertino, written about Apple. Apple really wasn't a computer company; it was a musical band, and it's a story written by an engineer from Apple. But it was all about. And if you read through it, it's like the role of music and musicality.
Oh, interesting.
And how they built their brand. It's not a book you hear a lot.
Yeah, no.
I saw it somewhere. And I'm a huge fan of music and songwriting and that method applied to business. But anyway, it was kudos to Hal for bringing in that kind of person, that kind of background.
Expands the thinking, right? It's not just having another designer up there talking about the same regurgitated shit that was been talking about. It's a different perspective.
And that's something they did really well, because I think when you go to some shows, it's always sort of like a very prominent personality coming in. And it's not that it's bad, and you could learn things within that, but it's a matter of a known person saying, here was a project I did in Europe. Here's a project. Here's something I built in for a client in Germany. Case studies are helpful, and you can pull some stuff out of it. But people tend to lean in when you start to see something like, what does sitting at the kids' table have to do with me helping to be industrial designer at Kimberly-Clark? And that's the part that surprise is a wonderful thing. And I think at conferences and if you were to talk to attendees, they'll have, again, eureka moments. And that's like creating eureka moments is built around that. How can you put yourself in a position to have a creative moment that you can walk away and go, I've got a new way of solving a problem.
Right.
And it's fun, and now I can share it with
I'm
other
energized. And well, we talked earlier, and this will be one of the last points.
Sure.
We talked earlier about the acceptance of mediocrity. And what we're talking about here is breaking out of mediocrity to bring out the most, the best creative version of whatever problem you're solving or of yourself. What does that mean to you? Like, how have we become mediocre, and why is that such an issue?
I think it ties again to some of what had happened when I mentioned the digital transformation in 2006. It was technology changed the landscape, and now when you add 12, 15 years beyond that, it changed the way we worked, and it frankly changed the seat at the table that creativity had. And I think the mediocrity has everything to do with the mechanization of creativity. Is all of a sudden I didn't have to, solve a particular problem around a brand the way I normally did. Technology has standardized it, sped it up, and made it way more efficient. So, as a creative, and that's why it's my own opinion on this, but I think creatives at agencies, creative at brand design agencies, I've suffered in the last in recent years because people aren't sure why are we here.
Yeah.
What are we doing? How can I add value? I don't understand, and that's why I think you're seeing a lot of offshoot places show up with very seasoned creatives from very big name places,
like the misfit agencies.
It's become that there's a bit of that movement. So the mediocrity has to do with standardization and that mechanization takes a lot of things out of our hands, and it feels like a lot of the time the creativity has now gone on autopilot. So why do I have to stretch? Why do I have to look for big ideas when people aren't even asking for big ideas? They're looking to extend the campaign in platforms and in other ways that do not require what has been standard what creative requirements used to be.
Extend the campaign. Right? That is the a creative's. I hate that term.
Well,
right? It's one of those things where, like, so you're just, Mr. and Mrs. Klein. That means that, yes, it's working, right? Which is great that it's effective, but that also means that we're gonna not capitalize on the opportunity that we have of a captive audience to continue to storytell and throw our narrative out there.
Yeah, and I think they're one of the creative leaders from Accenture song, said it really interestingly. He said, right now is mediocrity is free. When InDesign launched, whenever it launched, it took someone to learn a program, to get sort of facile in it and understand how to use it. And some people either gave up on it, but you had to develop a skill. And right now you could just write a prompt and it's pretty good.
Yeah.
So right now, pretty good is the accepted norm, and not great and not breakthrough. And I think that leads to this idea of mediocrity. And I think people in prominent places are stepping up, going, "Don't fall for this." Mediocrity is easy to do, but do not give it more credit than it deserves. And I think it was Nick Law from Accenture said, it's a great opportunity right now. And what that is the ability to leverage human ingenuity with the powerful capability of
technology or AI.
AI.
Yeah.
So it's in fact, I love the purpose statement that Accenture put together for their brand. First one in their history was, their purpose is to deliver on technology, deliver on the power of technology and human ingenuity. That it's not man against machine, it's man augmented by machine. And I think that is one way of rising above what mediocrity is, which is just settling for whatever gets spat out and still celebrating the creative urge. And I've been a fan since I heard it, is the idea of human ingenuity. We have it, we're born with it. And AI and technology is going to allow us to augment it and make the most of it. But it seems right now we're at a place where, it's still being figured out. And I think it's coming out of How and some of the other even client meetings I've had, I think there's optimism and there's positivity. But I think together it's going to take some continued discovery on how to figure out how creativity lives and breathes today.
Yeah. Well, how does, because there's two sides, right? There's mediocrity when it comes to producing work for a client, but then there's also a client that may not know any better to think that that's good enough.
That's a great question. And I think what comes to mind is a client will say, maybe we don't, it's as creative as it needs to be, but we have to hit numbers and we have to achieve certain, the goalposts change. And I think I'll go back to System 1, who basically has said now, the effectiveness of creative continues to decrease, almost to an alarming place. So
within advertising, within advertising.
Yeah, it's a good call out. And but advertising was always a reflection of culture. So the idea that what was good enough for a while is now forcing brands to struggle. And I think I'd mentioned before is there's research out there that says marketers now spend $1.4 trillion on marketing. And of that, 85% of the work lacks any distinctiveness. So my belief in is something I talk about with clients now is that for some time now, marketers have continued to optimize and make more efficient to the point where the work is perfectly ordinary.
Yeah, fine.
It checks tons of boxes, and now there's research that says consumers don't care anymore.
It's not a good thing.
Where's the human? I'm going to tie us back to where we started.
It's improv, tying it back to the beginning.
Where's the human connection?
Yeah.
Where's the nuance? Where's the wit? Where's the humor? And we talked about it just before we hit the switch on this call was, Cannes this week said loud and clearly, and it wasn't just industry figures. The world at large moved away from pure purpose commercials, which was, common good. And right now, humor and what I would call it wit and whimsy, if I may be so bold, was extremely popular.
Yeah.
So what does that tell us? It tells us, if we were to connect the dots from some of the things we were saying, is that people want to feel human again. They want to know that, you know, there's another human on the other end of what's coming, and there's a connection. And I think that's reason for optimism. You know, and I think if you're in the creative field, you should be excited. But as a client, you pretty much need, you know in your heart right now, we need to do something more.
Yeah.
This isn't working anymore.
Yeah.
Checking boxes and extending campaigns just on autopilot is starting to wane heavily. So what will we do? And that's why I think the stage is set for creativity to balance out. And you know how it is too, the cycle. And so it's very cyclical. And right now, creativity is stepping up to the plate.
Well, I feel extremely human sitting across the table from you, Gary, and having this conversation. I so appreciate you coming down.
Oh, man, it was awesome.
I had a blast. Tell everyone watching and listening where you live on the internet. How can they get in touch with you?
Well, most of what I do is LinkedIn.
Yeah.
You know, so many of the contacts and conversations that I've had, and some of the I fairly regular with posting content, but also showing bits from my workshops. So that's where most of it is, but you know, still building out some of the other social platforms that I'm on, but you can always find me on LinkedIn and straight up Gmail of Gary Kopervas at gmail.com.
Straight up Gmail. I haven't heard that one
all
before.
shiny, huh? Yeah. Nice Gmail account to get the job done.
It definitely will. For more on the Talking with Branders podcast, go to brandersmagazine.com. And for more on me, StephenBacanza.com. Until next time, peace out.